thank you for saying I'm the resident AI expert. I will say to that, in the land of the blind, the one-eyed man is king.
Hey, well, we already have a one-eyed man, so you're gonna have to find a different.
I did not set that up intentionally. Sorry, Jim.
It's not venture capital, it's private equity. It's the Private Equity Funcast. Pour yourself a drink and have a seat.
I'm Cass from the Private Equity Ops team.
I'm Paul from the Private Equity Ops team.
And we have Devin here with us, who is the founder and deal partner at ParkerGale. And Paul, do you ever get calls from folks talking about how you broke into PE Ops?
All the time, and increasingly more so, Cass. Thanks for asking.
Interesting that you would say that. I also take a handful of calls. I officially broke in somewhere around, in 2020 when there was a huge inflection of PE Ops roles. And I often have conversations that kind of lead to the chronology of where we are today and the evolution of how PE Ops even became a thing.
And it's a thing.
It's a thing.
It's more of a thing than it's ever been.
Yes.
But it is kind of interesting to look back at the history of it and talk about, like, one, what's the origin story? How did this even get started? Because it hasn't been around for that long, which is kind of interesting to remind yourself of. We can talk about that today. It's gone through some big changes in the last, I would call it, decade. And I feel like we're right in a moment where it's becoming its next form. It won't be the final form, but it's evolving, right? And that's the title of the episode today. It's like the evolution of what we do, private equity operations.
Yep. So that's exactly what we're going to go through is, hey, 20, 25 years ago, where was the state of private equity ops? It was really just beginning. We're also going to talk about kind of these inflection points where private equity ops became more and more of a thing. And that would be, 20, 25 years ago where we started. The next era was right around the global financial crisis. The next big swing, I think, was right around the post-COVID era. And then just for funsies, just to put it officially on record, we're also going to make some predictions on where we all think it's going to head in the next 5 to 10 years.
And the word we used when we were prepping for this episode was we're going to sprinkle in. There's going to be plenty of sprinkles of how we think about this, how it fits into what we do every day, and kind of where we are in terms of our team construction and where we focus. Because that's changed over the last 10 years, and we feel like we're right where we should be, and we'll talk more about that and where we think it's going. All
right, so let's get into it. Let's start with the early days. So 20, 25 years ago, I mean, we're in 4K now, so like I might look older than I am, I'm not sure, but I was not in private equity 20, 25 years ago. So I'm going to hand this over to Devin to talk about kind of what did you see in private equity ops? Was there private equity ops in the 90s? Heading into the 2000s.
Yeah, where did this thing come from?
So now I know I was invited on this episode because I'm the old guy. And I'm happy to be the old guy. So I started in private equity in 1995. When were you born, Cass?
89, still
Amazing.
an 80s kid.
All right, good. Yeah. I graduated from high school that you were born. So, which is great, why we have the generations around here. And I worked at a firm that had 6 investing partners and 0 operators. 2 VPs, 2 associates. 6 partners, 2 VPs, 2 associates. That was it. And we had a couple $100 million. Back then, 6 partners for $200 million seems like a lot. And that was William Blair Capital Partners. We were part of the William Blair team where I grew up and learned how to do this business. And we did just fine. There wasn't even an idea of having operating people around the table. That was what your management teams were for. Now, we did majority and minority investing. So maybe we didn't have the opportunity to influence management in the minority investing, but certainly on the buyout side, we could have brought in operating people, but it was never a topic of conversation. If we needed something, we went and hired a third party to help us with it, or we changed out the manager who wasn't getting it done for whatever reason. Now, fast forward like toward the tail end of that, 98, when I was departing for business school, we had brought in 3 operators. And this is going to lead to our point here, which was one was the ex-CEO of William Blair, Ned Janata. Amazing guy. I learned a ton from this guy, one of my great mentors. But what did he know about running retail shops and software companies. He ran an investment bank. Phenomenal deal sourcer, great investment mind, but he couldn't give a startup CEO advice about how to run the business. The other guy was the CEO of Continental Bank, which had been sold to Bank of America. Again, phenomenal guy in his late 60s, early 70s at the time. Great advice, great network, but again, not an operator of small businesses. And then the other was the vice chairman of Sears. If you remember Sears, that used to be a thing.
do.
Oh, yeah.
So he had sold off all the pieces of Sears. They had an insurance business, obviously a retail business and other businesses, and kind of was ready to kind of move into his next phase of his career. So we had our 3 operators, all had white hair, all were in their mid 60s to mid 70s. And none of them sat on the boards of any of the companies we owned.
So if you had to give all the senior partners at that point truth serum and ask them with 100% honesty, like, what are these guys here to do? What was the mindset at the firm of why you went from 0 operating partners to a couple, and like what was their place in the firm?
Yeah, I think it would be Rolodex and Rolodex.
Yep.
So
Okay.
2 different kinds of Rolodex. One is we might see a deal because they're here. They've got they know lots of people who own lots of businesses. They're in the business world. Certainly in the Midwest, these were 3 absolute legends of Chicago and the greater Midwest. So the phone would ring, hey, would you want to look at this? And then on the operating side, the company side, it would be more like, I know a guy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And this was the I got a guy
Yeah.
stage of private equity, which was I need a CFO in Indiana. Oh, I got a guy.
Yep.
Or we need somebody who knows how to implement a warehouse management system. Oh, I got a guy. And that was basically their value. And
Which can be valuable,
Yes.
right?
Yeah. And
Yeah.
sitting around the table while we were arguing about deals, they would have their input.
Yeah.
Right.
But they were never expected to like go in, sit down with the CEO and kind of, drive a project to completion. That never crossed their mind.
Yeah.
And it wasn't CEO in waiting. So in case the CEO doesn't work out, they're going to step in. So that.
Oh, in fact, these guys were explicitly wanted to be a
I'm good.
CEO again. They were like, this is fun.
Yeah.
Which it was.
Yeah.
I mean, what a great
Totally.
stage of your life to just be like, I get to sit around with smart people and have arguments and things, and I'm not responsible for any of this. This is great. And they were all investors in the fund too, which kept them interested.
Yeah.
And they all got offices at William Blair, which was nice, and a secretary to manage their day-to-day. So it was a great place to kind of ease into retirement, and very fond memories of it. Very fond as a young person. But I wouldn't say like operational impact was the reason they were sitting around the table.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that was kind of, I won't say everybody had that model, but that was a more common model kind of right at the start when you started to see people getting carved out as operating folks, not as deal folks, like around that time in the 80s or 90s, right?
If I look at my peers in the 90s that I grew up with, people at Frontenac or people at Madison Dearborn or Continental, which was a CIVC. Yeah, they all looked like us.
Yeah.
Bunch of deal people and no operators.
Yeah.
And the management team was expected to operate the business. I think if I racked my brain, I'd say maybe CD&R, Clayton, Dublé and Rice, a firm, TPG, KKR, like those were firms that are like, oh, they seem to be doing something different. They are matching this operating and investing talent together, but in a very embryonic way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, KKR created KKR Capstone in 2000. And that was a different model that we still see today, where it's kind of described as a McKinsey-style captive consulting firm. So they only work on KKR projects. They were really ahead of this curve, very different. And what was the reaction at the time? Like, what is that?
Complete innovators.
Yeah.
At a time like we're going to build a mini McKinsey that serves our portfolio, so we don't have to go hire McKinsey all the time to
Right.
serve our portfolio. At a time in 2000 where it was like, no, you just got to grow, right? This was, it was pretty innovative at the time. And I don't even sure Capstone fell on my radar till maybe several years later.
Yep.
When I was like, oh, this is a thing.
Right.
It wasn't something any of us talked about. It was just more of like, no, you go hire an old CEO and he sits on your board.
Serious question.
Yes. Serious answer.
Serious question.
Coming.
How did you create value in these companies? without handfuls of operators at your disposal.
Well, we hadn't invented the term value creation, so there was no value to create.
That's a good answer.
But I will say that, I have never seen EBITDA. I haven't wanted to adjust. So I guess that's how we created value. We just adjusted the EBITDA. Always up, never down, of course. But yeah, we did it through the management teams. The expectation was we are in the deal selection and talent selection business. And then some people, I would look to Dave Chandler, a mentor of mine and a good friend of the firm. He was really invested in the people side of the business as an investor. Mm-hmm. He was a deal guy. But hanging around with him, it's like, oh, he really is invested in these people. If he wasn't a private equity guy, he'd be a football coach probably, right? And so he brought that mentality where I was like, oh, you could actually be a deal person and kind of an operating person, but it was really around what you would think a talent person in a current fund would do. He was kind of doing both. So that rubbed off on me early in my career. But yeah, everything was done through the management team. And I think it kind of stayed that way until the financial crisis.
Yep, which leads us to the kind of second era that we kind of point to as we think about the evolution of PE ops and where you really see these inflections of like, when it was growing the most. And I think there'll be a little bit of a trend, but in moments of crises, PE ops has often been a response. And so we call, 2010-ish, the start of the professionalization era of PE ops.
So that's like, take the capstone model and it starts to kind of work its way through certainly the larger funds. So you've got Bain Capital, that's always kind of an operational bent, but really starts to formalize it. Vista rolls out its Vista Consulting Group, VCG, I think it's called. Mm-hmm. Toma starts to do the same thing. The large funds, Blackstone and others, starting to look at that model and say like, oh, that's something we should do and formalize it in a way. And there was kind of like in the middle of that period, Cass, like 2015, I think it was, KKR got sued by the government for Capstone.
Right. That's a risk with being a first mover.
So it was all brand new. They got in trouble for lack of transparency and disclosure around how the people were getting billed, what were they getting billed for. So the government looked and said, hey, between 2006 and 2011, you build your portfolio companies about $300 million, and they settled the suit for about $30 million, which, if you know private equity, that came out of the general partner's pockets, I believe. And it was a real turning point for, we need to really formalize things. We need to go to the government, the SEC, FTC early and say, we're going to set this up. How do we do it the right way? And I think that while it spooked people, and I don't know the details of the case, my sense is there were no rules of how to do it. KKR did the best they could with what they had. And the government was like, we're uncomfortable with some of these things. Mm-hmm. The big thing was they never charged their co-investors for any of these fees. The company bore the full cost of it. Go back to 2007, 8, 9, a lot of club deals, a lot of deals where big funds would all invest together. And KKR was, the company was bearing the full brunt of it rather than the co-investors paying for it. I think probably boiled down to a lot of that. So that one was probably very painful, but also set the standard for everybody else to say, oh, now there's a playbook.
Yep.
We're not doing this in blind. We can do this with a set of rules.
Yeah.
And it also brings up like the tension you have to grapple with if you are an investor and you do choose to stand up something that looks more like a captive consulting organization and how you think about the fees.
Yep.
Because if you have people that don't work for Bain or McKinsey or BCG that work for you, you're going to have to think about like utilization and how they pay for themselves and what the incentives are. And those people are ambitious and they're comping themselves versus their peers that are still at those consulting organizations and saying, well, to go make 7 figures like I would at an MBB firm, I'm going to have to sell a lot of work to these portfolio companies. But the power dynamic is different because that CEO or that management team might not treat that engagement the same way they would if they were shopping around for an MBB engagement. They might be saying like, do I have to say yes to this? Is this being pushed on me from the deal team? So there's tension there that you have to have structural ways of adjudicating inside the firm. And I think that Capstone example is where everybody woke up to that and said, one, there's value here because you don't have the brand new consulting team that's looking at this company for the first time doing the work. They get what it takes to work in PE. But two, you have to figure out how you deal with that incentive problem and make sure you're not overburdening the companies with work they don't need. Is that fair?
Yeah. And the innovation there was before Capstone or these things. I'm going to say you never charged somebody to the portfolio. Maybe you had a management fee that covered things. Like certainly the three guys I mentioned, the idea that we would charge their time to the portfolio didn't even cross our minds.
Yep.
So Capstone saying, oh no, we're using these outside resources. Let's use inside resources. Let's set it up as a separate entity. That broke some new ground. And when you break new ground in a regulated industry, sometimes, the government says no, and now there's some precedent. But I think, Cass, you were getting to the point of why did all this happen and this proliferation? Well, the GFC, if I'm an LP and I look at a bunch of deal people in the middle of a meltdown, I'm wondering, do these deal people who've never run a business know how to run a business?
Yep.
I think this era you're talking about was a big reaction to that.
Yep. Absolutely. That's, oh my God, our companies, are they going to go bankrupt and what do we do about it? And I'm not going to lie, when we were doing show notes about this and talking through this, GFC, I wrote down GFC. I was like, what's the GFC? I didn't know that we were being so casual about the global financial crisis that we could just say GFC now.
It's a thing. I mean, it's ancient history. So now we can now it can just be quaint.
It's like, what kind of regulation are you talking about?
But the GFC was a BFD back then.
Totally.
Yeah, which is kind of what we're talking about here.
Totally. So now we're on those terms. Now I know. So post GFC, I will say, so you have like the Vistas who are looking at KKR's model. They're starting to, yes, you're a bigger firm, you're a bigger fund. You can do this consulting arm strategy. Smaller funds are starting to have operating partners for the first time. And we have a Landcore study that was very fun to read, a Landcore talent report from 2011 that was like, oh my gosh, PE Ops is a huge deal. There's like 500 people doing this.
Across the entire industry.
This is crazy. This is blown up.
Yeah.
But those 500 people, I would say, you've got this consulting arm as one of the strategies. The other, everybody is trying to figure it out. Like, what does this look like? Because I'm a small firm. There's so many middle market firms that are like, I can't recreate the consulting model. So what do? They go find kind of a Swiss Army knife. So they're finding people who were general managers, who have been C-suite executives, who might not be in an applicable industry, or a strategy consultant from the Bains, the McKinseys. And that has been like an interesting thing that's morphed over time, is like, do you get somebody whose strategy, you came from Bain. What do you think about that move?
Shout out. Proud Alumni Network. Yeah. I mean, there's a couple interesting points in there. It's like, one, it's like, where do middle market firms come from? Like a lot of times there's spin outs of larger firms, right? So you had people who looked at their portfolio and they realized that the deals they liked to work on, or the deals that generated returns for them, or both, were the smaller deals that might not take up a big chunk of AUM at a mega fund. They said, I don't like being the 15th guy on the deal team, and I like doing these smaller deals. I'd like to spin out and start my own thing. And when they do that, a lot of those people bring with them the religion that they got from that firm, including, you know what, those operation guys were not so bad. But I want to do it a little bit differently. And so what did you have during that time period post GFC? You had people that have been through the crisis, that have seen the value that an ops team can provide, that have strong opinions about what flavor of ops would look like if they did it on their own. They had a track record that allowed them to spin out and do their own thing. And then you have like, okay, I'm going to stand up a firm and raise some money and hire an operating partner. And a lot of those people at the captive consulting firms were, and I like those recovering BCG and McKinsey and Bain guys because they make really pretty slides and they can break down a problem and they can give me the data that I need. And so, I think that was one of the archetypes that went with people as they spun out and started their own things.
Take a step back and think about the different models, right? Mm-hmm. There's the Capstone model, which a lot of large funds have adopted, which is
Yep.
we set up a separate entity, largely owned by the general partners of the fund and the owners and the heads, leaders of the consulting group. There may be equity spread out through that organization, but it's a separate entity.
Yep.
It's affiliated but separate, and it's billing the portfolio companies for their time. Rather than hiring a headhunter, you use Capstone.
Yep.
Rather than hiring a commercial diligence provider, you use Capstone. Makes a ton of sense, and probably saves money at the end of the day, would be my guess.
And they know exactly your playbooks, exactly what you're looking at over and over again. If you've got an industry that you're focused on, all of that.
Yeah, they got the fingertip feel for what your deals look like, what your talent looks like, especially on the recruiting side.
Yeah.
Yeah, great point.
Yeah.
2 is you've got the, hey, I've got a guy model still at this
Yes.
time, which is, hey, we have some CEOs who are really good. They don't want to do another deal, so they come and hang out with us in the fund. They sit on boards, they get paid from the board, maybe they get paid from the fund. Maybe they're fully employed by the fund, or maybe they're not, right? That kind of, I got a guy.
Yep.
Total generalists, CEOs for advice. And then you've got firms hiring internally on their payroll some generalists, like I'm just a very
Generalists.
good generalist.
Yeah.
And then towards the tail end of this, you probably start to see some specialists creep in. So there's the on your payroll, not billed out to the portfolio.
Yep.
There's the inside your firm, but billed to the portfolio on a case-by-case basis. And then there's the fully separate consulting entity that operates and lives on its own,
Yep.
billed to the portfolio.
And you probably saw, I mean, you checked me on this because
Yeah.
you lived this, but the first flavor of specialists were things where it was very technical, like very niche, very technical. There were hard dollars attached to it, and you do a lot of them.
Yep.
So if you're a big company with a big procurement footprint and you know you're spending way too much money on all the stuff that you buy and your cogs, and it's like, hey, we can go find $5, $10, $20 million by doing a specialized procurement project. You know, could a generalist consultant pull that off? Yes, but wouldn't you rather have the guy that just does that and does it for all the portfolio?
Yep.
And there's 3 or 4 kind of initial versions of that you started to see in the 2010-ish period.
Yep.
And I think that's where the specialization thing happened. But you lived it. Is that kind of what you saw too?
Yeah, again, I think there was, we were unique at, our prior firm that we had a Jim. Jim as a CTO embedded in the portfolio, not charged out to the portfolio companies. And he went from one company to the next kind of doing his thing. Lots of different things, given that we invested in different industries. But most people at that time looked like a general, an ex-CEO, an ex-operator, a generalist consultant. And yes, as you get closer to 2020, there are more gyms inside portfolios. Talent becomes a thing inside portfolios from a recruiting standpoint, not necessarily from like a talent development standpoint.
Yep.
Certainly, I don't know, sales and marketing wasn't quite there. I don't think was a thing. And then the challenge you have with specialists, especially in this early kind of middle phase, like the in-between period, was, well, what if they run out of stuff to do? They did all the things.
And they're still on my payroll.
And they're still on my payroll,
Yeah.
right? Which is a challenge. So
Yeah.
you're like, well, what if we did all their procurement? So that became a challenge, especially for GPs who like net fee income. You know, if they're on the payroll, they're coming out of your pocket, literally every day.
And now people are getting a little bit of religion towards the end, as we approach 2020, about having an ops person or some version of those 3 flavors.
Well, I'll say this: showing up in a fundraising meeting
Yeah.
in 2018 and 19, when things were still rocking and rolling, before the next crisis we had.
Yeah.
And not talking about your operating capabilities or your talent you have, either outsourced, insourced, charged the portfolio on the payroll. That's a pretty big slide that's missing from your deck.
Yep.
Because LPs got religion that, again, 2008 and 9 and 10 were bad. But if you look back on it, those companies didn't do as badly as everybody expected.
Yep.
One, because the banks played it cool and
Yep.
didn't take the keys. Companies, the owners of the business really got religion on. We're going to operate our way out of this mess. And some of the big blow-ups everybody thought were going to come were still not great investments, but weren't as bad as they were. So at that point, I think LPs were like, you guys need
LPs,
you need operators. Don't come in here with 3 guys in a fund. Like that doesn't work anymore unless you are absolutely crushing your returns. They don't care so much.
Yeah.
But like anybody who's good to okay, like you needed to show some sort of differentiation.
Yeah. I will say the contrarian view at the time, if you were going to go into a fundraising meeting, hopefully with good numbers from your prior fund, and you were anti-ops, the talk track at the time was, hey, I don't want to signal to my CEOs that I don't trust them. PE ops actually hinders productivity was a talk track. And firms, have to fundamentally change in order to absorb and manage PE ops. And that's a huge undertaking. So what's your reactions to those 3 hot takes at the time?
Go ahead, Paul.
I mean, it's a choice. I think this is in some ways, it's a positioning exercise, right?
Yeah.
Like your job as a GP is to put money to work and generate a return, but you also, what's happening in the background is more and more and more and more funds are being started at this point, and the asset class is becoming more mature, which if you're an LP, it starts to become really difficult to tell what's different about you versus everybody in the market, especially if you're an emerging manager that's on their first or second fund. And so, whereas in the past, I think you could hedge a little bit on what is your position on PE ops, like maybe you've opportunistically hired a CEO and you have that person on your team page and then they retire and they're not there anymore. You could get away with being a little more inconsistent about your philosophy on how involved you are with the portfolio and what form that takes. I think the time period you're talking about now, like LPs are waking up to the fact that this is a thing.
Yep.
They're accepting of the fact that there's varying levels of commitment to the thing, including models where it's, hey, we run everything through our CEOs and we're really good at picking CEOs.
Yep.
And if the returns line up, that's fine. But I think what you were seeing is people were being asked to take a position. Like, what is your philosophy on the role of this in your fund? And you ended up adopting one of a couple of models, which we'll talk about here in a little bit. But that's my take.
But Cass, those 3 things you mentioned are all true enough to ring true with a lot of people. Like, who is this guy you just brought in to work on this deal? He looks a lot like a better version of me.
Yep.
That's making me nervous.
I thought you trusted me.
Because you all work for us. The first thing you can say to a CFO, a head of sales, a CTO is, I have a job. I'm not looking for your job. Don't worry about it. Not the same if you've got a consultant who looks a lot like a better version of your CEO who's now all of a sudden joined the board as chairman.
So if you have a fund that has a history of swapping out your CEOs for people who before that had operating partner on their business card.
Yeah. And then this swarm of operators coming into a company and confusing things, right? I think for every person you'll find that says, wow, that the operating team at a fund was so valuable and helped me and can list the ways they did it, you'll find an equal number of people who say like, it was confusing. It was a lot. It was a lot to handle. And I think we'll get into maybe some of the reasons around that.
Yep.
And then, I think a lot of people in private equity are in private equity because they're not good managers. And all of a sudden they bring in operators who are used to being managed extremely well.
Oh, they love feedback. They love feedback.
Yeah. And, private equity people are like, you want a review? It's been you've been here for 3 years. We do reuse every 5 years.
You still have a job. That's your review.
Yeah. Literally. Yeah. Like if you weren't doing a good job, you wouldn't be here, right? Not a great way to motivate your team. And, coming from a place like Bain, which is famously amazing at developing
feedback intensive would be the phrase I would use.
And career management and getting new experiences, stepping into a private equity firm, which you've been told your entire career, like this is the top of the mountain. Get yourself into the ops role of a private equity firm. I think very disconcerting showing up and saying like, nobody talks to me. I don't know what I'm supposed to do.
Go be useful.
Yeah, go be useful is kind of the expectation. And I think that was the chafe. I will say like my cynic's view on that period, 2010 to 2020, is the professionalization of operating teams and organizations inside funds coincided with 10 years of zero interest rates.
Yep.
And wildly available debt prior to valuations skyrocketing, certainly into 2020, but 2020 to today, see nothing like it on the valuation front. So how do we know it worked?
Right. What's the causation?
Was it we hired all these operators and look at all the returns? Or if we didn't hire one operator, we still would have had zero interest rates for 10 years and we still would have had wildly abundant debt. And valuations were mostly normal for most of that decade.
Yeah. Well, an attempt to answer that causation correlation question, there was a McKinsey study that came out in 2020 that talked about post-crisis and PE firms that did have operators versus PE firms that didn't have operators did have a net IRR 5 points higher. So they're trying to bifurcate it a little bit than those who did not. So this was, again, came out in 2020, right before we see COVID in a totally different inflection. And then those firms also, you saw exactly what you were saying, LPs started wanting it. So those firms were also rewarded with larger funding commitments, larger growth in the post-crisis years. Firms with ops teams got way more funding than firms without that ops team story.
Yeah, I think by 2020 and beyond, if you're showing up to raise capital without operating people on your team, you have amazing returns and can and name your price, I guess. And there are not a lot of firms, if you look at kind of persistence of returns from one fund to the next, it doesn't persist. So like there aren't a lot of firms that have racked up 5 amazing funds in a row without operating people, and they don't need to convince an LP that they know what they're doing. But you joined ops in 2020.
I did.
Right. So, that was a point when like multiple expansion dried up. You had to execute, you're paying top dollar for everything during your now 5 years in the ops world, 6 years in the ops world. The models were starting to become more distinct of kind of how it operated. So what have you seen since you turned into an operator?
I know. I think it's helpful to mention that when I did start in ops in 2020, I started in a more functional specialist role, which was we were starting to see that shift in general. And that's what we were doing here at ParkerGale was, okay, let's align by function. For those who don't know, I started at ParkerGale in 2015 on the investment team, deal team side. So my background is in accounting and finance. So naturally, I moved into talent. No, I started moving into finance. So I work primarily with our CFOs across our businesses. And I remember at the time meeting with a friend who had a similar role. And we were like, oh my gosh, there's 2 of us. I wonder how many of us there are who are in private equity ops, who are only focused, not doing the generalist thing, not doing the ex-consultant thing, who are only focused on really our CFOs at the time and finance. And we guessed around 10 and we're like, let's make a group. And we like formally went out to like actually find, it wasn't socially acceptable to get people together in 2020. So maybe
are we talking 10 in the greater Chicagoland area?
Yes, in the greater Chicagoland area.
Right.
In the greater, we're like, we should get together over a beer and talk about our experience kind of thing.
Literally the home of middle market private equity. So there are more than 10 funds here in Chicago.
Yes.
Correct. And so we were like, there might be about 10 of us. And we looked and we're like, oh my God, there's like 15, maybe 18 at the time. That list today, finance specific in 2026 that I know. So I'm missing a lot of people, but I've like made an effort to try to find people that, look and feel like me. In Chicago, it's over 60. Like that's how much religion in a couple of years we've gotten on the finance expertise, and like by other functions, by go-to-market, by talent. I mean, same thing's happening.
And for those listening, that's Cass, CASS at ParkerGale.com if you want to join her finance club.
That's right. Or if you're a CFO in the Chicagoland area.
RIP inbox.
No, that's true. But you have been the glue to bring these people together. It's been a team effort, but you've been kind of the ringleader of this group.
Sending a lot of annoying emails. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well,
that's what it takes.
That's what PE operations is reminding
Yes.
people of the things they're supposed to do that they don't want to do, and you're reminding why they should do it in the first place.
Yes. So I think there is in 2020 to 2025. So if you remember, I said in 2011, the estimate was around 500
Total ops people.
Total ops people
At funds.
Yes. by now, in this new stretch, this new era, by the end of 2025, we're talking about estimates around 20,000.
If you think of Heidrick did a study, because I've talked about this recently, where I think in 2021 there were 7% of people inside private equity firms would say they're an operator on the operating team. And 2 years later, it was 21%. During around that same time, IR people doubled. So IR people doubled and operating people tripled. So your guesstimate is probably right. Paul, what about on the finance side, and maybe reflect on Jim's tech side? Like, have you seen similar proliferation? Given that the sales side was maybe a little squish. Well, it's easier to measure. You hit your number, you didn't hit your number. Fire the head of sales. Hire a new head of sales. We're all finance people. We gravitate more towards that, and that would be like, oh, that's broken, and we could help them fix it. Versus the go-to-market side. So
I think what had to happen is like every function had to be worn down a little bit so that the acceptance of outside help was kind of destigmatized. Because every function has that, right? Like every CTO is like, don't touch my code. Every CFO is like, don't touch my budget. Every sales leader is like, don't touch my pipeline. And I think these people had to go through a couple of cycles where they've seen the version of outside help, whether it comes from the investors or comes from a consultant, where they know what they don't need, and they like hold on to the fact that like, there's part of my job that I'm going to do, but there's also outside stuff that is maybe more analytically intensive in my world of go-to-market, or doesn't happen that often, but super important, or is just like part of being an investor-backed business that wasn't there before. And in those cases, I think they're more accepting of outside help. And I think the investors are saying like, our companies aren't great at this. It's actually distracting for them, but it's also a really, really important part of either making the business better or getting ready for the eventual exit that we all know is coming. And so in that period that you're talking about, I do think there's like a coalescing that happened where people had lived through a couple of these cycles, like the number of sales leaders that had lived through at least one private equity ownership cycle in 2010 versus in 2020. I think it's just a bigger number in 2020, right? So the exposure was higher. But yeah, in my world, it's like, okay, I know you're not here to take my job. There is some stuff that's analytically rigorous and distracting that I would like some help with. And having just been exposed to it, I'm more accepting of that help. And then what else is happening? Another 10 years of investors going along and having a more concrete, more strong opinion about like, these are the areas where our companies need and want the help, and we should staff up against those things. I think all of that was happening at the same time, and it's resulted in, one, more ops people, which isn't just about growth of AUM, because to your point, growth of ops people has outpaced growth of AUM, but it's everybody kind of knowing more of what they need, I would say.
Yeah. And I think it's interesting that like your examples are all pointed at like portfolio facing during the hold period work.
Yeah.
I think in the pre-2020 era, a lot of the ROI, as people were thinking about, is an ops person worth it, was often on like due diligence. I remember when I first got hired to come back here, somebody was like, how many deals does ParkerGale do a year? Because like, their mental math was, well, Cass is only going to be doing quality of earnings work and bringing that in house. So like if she does that once or twice a year, that's very boring, and it's not going to pay for, no offense to all of my friends in quality of earnings work. And that's not going to pay for, her salary. And like, that makes no sense. Like, call me when you want to go back to the deal team kind of thing. But I think now there is more like just religion around the discrete projects. It's much more portfolio facing. What have you seen kind of as ParkerGale has changed, or in friends of the firm have changed their ops strategy? Like what does the work look like that it didn't look like before?
At our prior firm, we had one gym.
Right.
And I wanted, as soon as we launched ParkerGale, I wanted a gym in every pot. So pick every function, and I wanted a gym. You
can never have more than one gym.
Yeah, too many gyms. It's like too many Daves and Dr. Seuss. But there is only one gym. We know that. So it was a tall order. So we're like, all right, where should we start? Well, talent. That was important to us. Let's get a talent person. Let's get a commercial diligence person, somebody really thinking about, the ICP, where the business is and what it could be, but thinking about that from diligence all the way through to the other side, with the goal of that would eventually turn into like a product management role. And then, finance, as you were in business school and thinking about like coming back, is like, yeah, we'd love to have Cass. You were already the CFO whisperer before you left and came back, after doing a couple stints at other funds and seeing what it worked. Like that made a ton of sense. But looking back, I feel like we over-rotated too fast before we knew how to manage it. And while we thought we were kinder, gentler, private equity firm, you're busy raising a fund, buying companies, managing those companies. And we weren't great managers of some of the people who were on the team, which led during 2020, like me getting phone calls from CEOs saying like, hey, I was just told I need to do this. And I was like, I don't know what you're talking about. So COVID for me personally was like a reset of like, what do we actually want to do? What do we actually want to be? Largely because I'd gone from 100 flights a year for 25 years to 0. And sitting in my little gardening shed that we turned into a home office across the yard, which was very good for my marriage, not to be, upstairs in the guest room, was really like, oh, let's get back to basics and kind of only do the things that matter the most, that have the biggest impact. What I've seen happening while we were doing that, which was painful, and we've got a lot of questions like, why did you do that? You have fewer operating people than you had, 10 years ago. Like what went wrong, or like what broke, or what happened? And it was like, nothing did. We just kind of evolved to have the right tool in the right place at the right time. And what's happening in this phase, this 2020 to 2025 phase, feels like if the first phase was the Wild West, the second phase was the professionalization, this phase feels like the proliferation, that even the smallest funds are building operating teams in the image of the largest funds. Which is we need something for everyone, and more is better than less. So I don't know. What do you guys?
And the people who've been doing it for a while, I would put us in this camp because we've been buying the same type of companies for 10 years, more if you include kind of previous iterations of the firm. You have opinions that you didn't have a decade ago about what you think works.
You're allowed to change your mind.
Where the companies need help, where they're going to accept the help, which is maybe the most important thing. But, when I talk to people about my job, that I talk about the evolution of ParkerGale, and I talk about, check me on this, but I don't think we've ever had more conviction that we are deployed on the ops team against the 3 areas. Talk about the 4th, because we're all doing the 4th, where our companies both need and want the help.
Well, I think you have a very unique lens to this because you started focused more on the talent side, right? I know you don't like to talk about it.
No, I got hired as the talent guy. I got hired as one of 2 talent guys.
Why the pivot?
Well, Paul was one of the leaders of Bain's leadership development group, and was one of the people who got it started. So we were like, that's the guy we
Give me
want.
some of that.
Yes.
Bring in and help us get there. And I think a lot of this evolution had a lot to do with Paul, which was, hey, we don't have a full-time talent person right now, because I think to Paul, Jim, and I, and Ryan sat down and decided talent needs to be dispersed into every part of the organization. Because, Cass, you can hire a CFO better than I can, and you can hire a CFO way better than Paul can. No offense, Paul.
No.
And Paul can hire a head of sales better than I can, and Paul can way better than you can do, because he just sees it all the time. And he's also a magnet for good heads of sales that want to work in private equity, and you're the same for finance. And we wanted to teach everybody on the team how to be great at talent selection, talent motivation. Again, back to that early days of Dave Chandler, caring about the humans in the business and trying to motivate them to do things. We moved to that move, which was talent exists everywhere. Let's get everybody good at it. And then the three things that you guys do. So tell us about what are the three things and why are they the most impactful?
Well, what do all of our companies want to do better? They all want to get and keep customers. That's kind of me. They all want to like really understand how the business is performing and understand where the challenges and opportunities are so they can fix those things.
Make their deal teams happy.
That's you. And then they want to build great products. And that's Jim.
Yep.
And like that seems really simple and it seems really obvious, but it took us a while to get conviction and to notice like where the convergence of all that was. Like one, what can you get good at from the outside in? Because there is stuff that you can't get good at from the outside in. It could only exist inside the company. Two, like where are the companies accepting of help, maybe right away or something that you have to wear them down a little bit. I think we're good at both of those things. And then three, like, can you deliver on what you say you can? Like, can you provide help that's actually helpful and not distracting or not superfluous, or can you help the companies get results? And then, the talent thing, I think we woke up after a couple of years of having dedicated people, of which I was one. And what did we say? We said, well, good for us. We wrote a bunch of stuff down and we invested in teaching the companies how to do this themselves, especially on the most important part of hiring, I would argue, which is most important part of talent, which is hiring. So now we have this playbook that is portable and teachable to everybody that we didn't have before. And we have a bunch of practice having gotten pulled into every part of the talent process, selection, performance management, everything. So we all had reps. And at the same time, like me being a recovering sales guy, I kind of raised my hand and said, our companies sell on revenue multiples, right? Yes. Who around the table was responsible for increasing revenue and increasing the multiple on that? And what's the quote from Rounders? Like, if you look around the poker table and you don't see the sucker's you. I said, I would like that job.
Yeah.
And, credit to you guys, because I think we all recognized together that we had done those things. We had immersed ourselves in the talent stuff. We'd figured out what matters. We wrote down our playbook. We taught it to everybody at the firm and a lot of people at the companies. And we felt like we were ready for that next evolution. And so far it's worked out.
And where I, drew the line, again, kind of coming out of this COVID period of self-reflection and deep meditation out in that gardening shed, was I think we're propping up our management teams.
Yeah.
Are we helping them or are we propping them up?
What's the difference?
Yeah, propping up is you're doing their job for them that they wouldn't be able to do on their own. And if you stop doing it, it wouldn't happen. That's propping up. That means you have the wrong person, right? Helping out is, hey, you don't have an FP&A person right now, CFO? We can carry that load for you.
Yep.
Right? That's helping out. The CFO's job isn't to be the head of FP&A. Hopefully, right? And you eventually hire a head of FP&A, but maybe the company's not ready for it.
Yep.
Maybe we haven't built the systems yet to even have somebody. So Cass or somebody on the investment team under Cass's guidance is going to fill in that gap. But if have a head of FP&A and you're running the customer cube,
or you're doing their budget for them.
Yeah, or you're literally on every budget call. Or if you've got a head of sales and you're literally building their pipeline management and logging into Salesforce, sure.
You don't have any Salesforce logins, do you?
Too real. Yeah.
Yeah. So these things like that's propping up to me. And my cliche around here is we're in the talent selection business, not the talent rehabilitation business. And I have fallen into that trap because boy, does it feel really good to rehabilitate somebody who isn't doing well, and you turn them around. And you have one great story for each person. You've got 100 horrible stories where it didn't work. So that was a revelation, remembering what I was taught early in my career. So we got out of the propping up business. And I think one of the conversations we have when we're reviewing portfolio and doing 9 boxes and talent reviews across the portfolio is like, all right, are we helping?
Yep.
In the right time at the right place and getting out of the way, or are we propping up? And if you have a operating team that is separate from the investing team, that is charging the portfolio for their time, that person who's being charged out wants to be busy, wants to be billed out, wants to be effective. So what are they going to do? They're going to find projects.
Yeah.
They're going to do the job for the person who's not getting it done.
Yep.
And it may be completely masking the problem back to the investment team,
Yep.
who unfortunately makes the decision in most firms, whether that person keeps their job or not. I think we're very different. You could walk in and say, the CFO is not getting it done. We need to make a change. And I would say, let's get started right now. Versus I'm getting billed out and I need to be effective. Obviously, you could be wildly effective and get billed out. They're not, they're not mutually exclusive, but you have an incentive to bill yourself out and be busy. So you find things to work on. All those things could be important things. They may not be necessary.
Yep.
They may not be necessary right now. Cass, you may be saying, I want to do all these things, but we haven't implemented NetSuite yet. We can't even get to the data yet. So you just got to be comfortable to just take a pause and do that.
All right. So where do we think we're headed next? What are the predictions?
I think we're headed towards a skinnier operating model in the next 10 years, and a more effective one. I think, we're only 15 years out from the GFC, right? That's one fund cycle,
Yep.
right? From, first close to fully liquidated portfolio. So it's not that old yet. So it makes sense that everybody rotated up into these very large, I need a gym in every pot. If I can have 3 operating people's better than 1 and 30's better than 3, because look at how effective it is. I also think if you're charging them out to the portfolio and you're raising big funds, like it doesn't really cost you much. So like, why not have that? And it gives the team leverage, gives the investment team, who's largely capturing most of that fee income, leverage. I think people are going to look back and say, like, is it effective? And this, when the CEOs have a loud enough voice, and enough CEOs and management teams have been through multiple cycles of private equity owned companies, which is again still 25 years old, of like people having worked for multiple,
Still early.
multiple private. How many companies people have worked for? 3 private equity owned businesses.
Not a lot.
Yeah, not a lot.
Yep.
So I think the management team is like, whoa. I love the help. Absolutely love the help. I don't need all of this.
Yep.
So I think we're headed towards a more I think we're going to rationalize this, the size of these things up from the top to the bottom.
Yeah.
I think most funds, if not every fund, will have operators for sure. And I would hope they were more deeply integrated into the fabric of the deal doing than just the post-deal operations would be my dream for the industry. But you guys are in it all day, every day. What are your predictions?
I agree. I do think that we're swinging certainly into like overly complex. And there's a lot of miscommunication between investment team, ops teams at these larger levels. It's confusing and it's difficult to manage also. But I think we're due for a correction, which also I mention often to these people who call me, which is not the most motivating speech that they were looking for. But I'm like, you have to be very specific in the spots you're picking, because I think we're in a boom and I don't think it's going to last forever. I think there's going to be a correction. Paul, I am very curious. I've been seeing this a lot, and you are our resident AI, more of an AI expert, I would say, here at ParkerGale. I'm seeing all of these new hires in ops that are like deal partner ops, AI specialist, AI MD. How do you feel about that?
This is the talent partner of 2015.
Well, thank you for saying I'm the resident AI expert. I will say to that, in the land of the blind, the one-eyed man is king.
Hey, well, we already have a one-eyed man, so you're going to have to find a different.
I did not set that up intentionally. Sorry, Jim. I think you're going. It's a microcosm of what PE Ops was going through in 2010, which is like, we probably need this, and people realize 10 years later that it's going to take a while and probably several iterations, just like we went through, to really align and land on what is the role of AI in portfolio operations. And I think it's going to look like talent. I don't think it's one person who's the AI guy. I think this has to be a skill that someone has to quarterback and teach it to people inside the firm, but it becomes everybody's responsibility. And I'm a big believer that your AI strategy as a portfolio operations person or as an investor is, you should be teaching people how to use it. You should be creating the space for people to experiment with it. And you should be encouraging people to share what's working, not only inside the company, but across the portfolio. And have we hired a resident AI person? No, we haven't. Will we? Probably not. But I do think we're doing a good job of keeping the pressure on. And I think we're doing an excellent job of sharing the highlights and the wins across the portfolio, which is doing a couple things. Like one, it's creating copy-paste phenomenon where people steal the good stuff from other people, which is, I think that's 30% of our value is making those things visible. But it's also sending a social signal, which is like, oh, I haven't gotten on this yet, and I probably should. And both of those things are good things.
Yeah, I think there are a lot of CTOs of private equity-owned businesses seeing these job postings for the fund that owns them for this AI expert, and they're thinking, oh no, they're coming for me.
No.
They've largely stayed away from me because most people aren't as technical as Jim, where you can get in the stuff and have the respect of the CTO. That's very hard to pull off, harder than other functions. So I think now it's the CTO's time to get a taste of PE ops, which is I need an AI expert, and here he or she comes. And there can be really amazing things, like you said, hey, let me steal this from somebody else and you can use it. Then there's also, I need more AI, which isn't very helpful. And it's moving so fast. What the advice you gave somebody even 6 weeks ago before co-work came out
Totally new.
is completely different than it is today. So I think we have too many generals and not enough battles. That's one hot take. I think a lot of the firms, smaller firms, mid-sized firms that are trying to copy the models of the large firms, it's like having a garage band hire Aerosmith roadies to do their tour. Don't need that many people. And there are a lot of chefs, and the CEOs have no idea what anybody's cooking.
Yeah.
It was like, what's happening inside 3 layers down from me that's bubbling up? That's not tied to the value creation plan that I agreed to 3 years ago with the investment people who I did this deal with.
Yeah.
It's very confusing. Not that it can't be done really well. We know lots of firms with big operating organizations that do it really well. They tend to be the ones that are the most deeply integrated in everyday, all-day activities.
Yep.
But if you're an operator not sitting in the room for all the conversations, I think that's a tell that you may be one of these people that gets rationalized someday.
Yeah. I think the generalist arc of PE firms that went to specialization is going to be followed shortly after by a PE ops arc that has the same flavor, which is if you're a PE ops generalist or you're sitting in a higher strategy role, listen, that's going to work. There's still plenty of PE firms that have a generalist mandate, and that works for them. And there will still be, it's not like these jobs are gone forever, but I do think we're going to see that arc towards specialization and function and like actually here's the ROI of these types of projects that we do over and over again in the companies.
And that'll come as fundraising pressure increases and fund sizes may be the same or smaller in subsequent funds, or the time between fundraises gets expanded. But maybe to end on like a positive note, AI is coming for all of us anyway.
All of us.
So like, don't worry about it.
Yeah.
It'll be fine.
Embrace it. Be polite so you can be an indoor pet when the robots take over. That's my advice.
Well, I'm an optimist who likes to be proven wrong than a pessimist who wants to be proven right would be my motto for this year and all those things. But I thought this was a great conversation about the eras of operations, and the good news about putting our flag in the ground is we're going to find out if we're right or not over the next 5 years.
Somebody will comment on this 5 years from now and they'll tell us.
Let's go.
The power of the comment section on the internet. Bring it on. We'd love to hear from you.
Yeah. Awesome. What do we get wrong? What do we get right? Now we
Lots.
just
Bye for now.
bye for now.
See ya.
Neither this podcast nor any of the information contained here constitutes an offer to sell or a solicitation of an offer to buy any security or instrument in, or to participate in, any ParkerGale fund or other investment vehicle. Past performance is not indicative of future results, and there is no assurance that any ParkerGale fund will achieve its objectives or avoid significant losses. This podcast may contain forward-looking statements. Such statements are subject to various risks and uncertainties. ParkerGale is an investment advisor registered with the United States Securities and Exchange Commission. Registration with the SEC does not imply a certain level of skill or training. Guests appearing on the podcast may or may not be a financial sponsor of the podcast or an episode of the podcast. ParkerGale may have business relationships with certain guests, sponsors, or organizations mentioned during the program. In some cases, guests or sponsors may provide services to or receive services from ParkerGale, which creates potential conflicts of interest. Any sponsorship of this podcast does not imply endorsement by ParkerGale and is not provided in exchange for, nor intended to solicit, business between the sponsor and ParkerGale. The appearance of any guest does not constitute an endorsement or testimonial of ParkerGale or any fund. For additional information regarding ParkerGale, please refer to ParkerGale's website, www.parkergale.com, or Form ADV, available at advisorinfo.sec.gov.
From the heart of Chicago to all over the globe, a couple private equity geniuses, they share what they know. They love to mess with technology where the future is sink or swim. It's the Private Equity Funcast with Devin and Jim. Technology issues and middle market PE-backed companies, they bicker with each other and they don't take themselves too seriously. It's not venture capital, it's private equity. It's the Private Equity Funcast. Pour yourself a drink and have a